The winter is brutal, and rations have been exhausted during your expedition in the wilderness of Kenora, Ontario. The nearest outpost is more than a few days' travel away, and one of the members in your group has succumbed to the elements. The dead man's body lay still against the tree he'd chosen to be his headrest the night before. His face looks peaceful, as you all gather around and come to the consensus that the ground is too frozen to bury him. An unusual chill runs down everyone's spine. I don't know if I can make it to town without something in me.
You can do it, but I would never.
He was our friend. I can't. All of you come to your senses except one, and who can judge him? The thought even came across your own mind. You would think having eaten, the man would be better off, but for some reason he seems even more hungry now than before. The day of travel goes normal, but you can't help but shake this feeling of dread. For some reason your friend looks off, a little less human. Night comes and you wake to the sound of screaming and bone-chilling noises no human can make. A tall, emaciated silhouette dashes, and the dismembered bodies of your friends are scattered about the camp. You run, but something heavy smashes you into the ground. You turn to see the rotten, emaciated body with glowing yellow eyes, yellow fangs, and a rotting yellow tongue, inches from your face, drool dripping down onto your cheeks. For some reason, the face of this creature looks eerily familiar. It has features similar to that of your cannibalistic companion. Oh no. The creature raises its head to the moonlit sky and lets out an eardrum-bursting yell. The last thing you see is its rotten maw coming straight for you. That's right, everyone. Today we're talking about the Wendigo. This myth comes to us from Algonquin Native American legends, predominantly in the Great Lakes region and parts of Canada. While descriptions of the Wendigo may vary slightly between the tribes, common to all of these cultures is the view that the Wendigo is a malevolent, cannibalistic supernatural being that is strongly associated with winter, the north, coldness, famine, and starvation. The word Wendigo roughly translates to the evil spirit that devours mankind. This means the Wendigo has a thirst for human flesh that cannot be quenched. This undying need to consume human flesh is reflected in the descriptions of the Wendigo appearing to be emaciated. But don't let its weak-looking body fool you. This 15-foot-tall giant with glowing eyes and yellow fangs is said to be a near-perfect hunter that knows its territory perfectly and can control the weather with dark magic. The legend of the Wendigo lends its name to the disputed modern medical term Wendigo psychosis, which is considered by some psychiatrists to be a syndrome that creates an intense craving for human flesh and simultaneously a fear of becoming a cannibal. Ironically, this psychosis is said to occur within people living around the Great Lakes of Canada and the United States. Wendigo psychosis usually develops in the winter in individuals who are isolated by heavy snow for long periods of time. The initial symptoms are poor appetite, nausea, and vomiting. Subsequently, the individual develops the delusion of being transformed into a Wendigo monster. People who have Wendigo psychosis increasingly see others around them as being edible. At the same time, they have an exaggerated fear of becoming cannibals, perhaps because deep down, they have the self-awareness to know that the spirit of the Wendigo is overtaking them. The most common cure for the psychosis administered by the native healers, more often than not, was execution. One well-documented case occurred in 1878, when a Plains Cree trapper from Alberta named Swift Runner suffered one of the worst cases known to man. Swift Runner was a trader with the Hudson's Bay Company who was married and the father of 6 children. During the winter of 1878 to 1879, Swift Runner and his family were starving, along with numerous other Cree families. His eldest son was the first to die of starvation, and at some point, swift runners succumbed to Wendigo psychosis. Even though emergency food supplies were available at Hudson's Bay Company Post, some 25 miles away, he did not attempt to travel there. Rather, he killed the remaining members of his family and ate them. He eventually confessed and was executed by authorities at Fort Saskatchewan. Another well-known case involving Wendigo psychosis was that of Jack Fiddler, an OG Cree chief, a medicine man who was put on trial for the murder of a Cree woman. While he did plead guilty, he defended himself by saying that she was on the verge of turning Wendigo. In his life, Fiddler claimed to have killed 14 Wendigos. Some of these creatures were said to have been sent by enemy shamans, and others were members of his own band who had been taken with the insatiable, incurable desire to eat human flesh. In the latter case, Fiddler would usually be asked by family members to kill a very sick loved one before they turned Wendigo. Fiddler's own brother was killed after turning Wendigo when the food ran out on a trading expedition. Hudson's Bay Company traders, the Cree, and missionaries were well aware of the Wendigo legend, though they often explained it as a mental illness or superstition. Regardless, several incidents of people turning Wendigo and eating human flesh are documented in the records of the company. In 1907, Fiddler and his brother Joseph were arrested by the Canadian authorities for murder. Jack committed suicide, but Joseph was tried and sentenced to life in prison. He ultimately was granted a pardon, but died 3 days later in prison before receiving the news of his pardon. But are these people truly being taken over by the spirit of the Wendigo, or does the psychosis exist because of their belief in the Wendigo? The frequency of Wendigo psychosis cases has decreased sharply in the 20th century as the Native Americans come into greater and greater contact with Western ideologies. The Wendigo has found its way into popular culture in the forms of books, movies, and even video games. It was the inspiration for the creature of Stephen King's Pet Sematary and the main antagonist in the hugely popular 2015 video game Until Dawn. Sightings of the Wendigo itself are still reported, especially in northern Ontario, near the Cave of the Wendigo and around the town of Kenora, where it has allegedly been spotted by traders, trackers, and trappers for decades. There are many who still believe that the Wendigo roams the woods and the prairies of northern Minnesota and Canada. Kenora, Ontario has even been given the title of Wendigo Capital of the World, and sightings of the creature in this area have continued well into the 21st century. Whether or not the Wendigo is a creature, or a scary story used to keep people from becoming too greedy or too gluttonous, we'll never know. Perhaps it does roam the woods. Maybe the spirit does take over people who aspire for too much and disrupt the normal flow of life among their people. But all I can say is, the next time you go camping in the Kenora area, be sure to pack more than enough food. You wouldn't want to be tempted by other alternatives. Well, that concludes our first mythology segment and our first episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. I always find stuff like this interesting. The Native Americans have really interesting stories and myths and legends, like the Thunderbird encounters with Bigfoot, or what we now know as Bigfoot. I hope to get into those later. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tune in for the next one, and thank you for listening. Ryan out.